So, Anora is the new film by Sean Baker. And I've always admired Baker's films because they have a great sense of like lived in realism to them, where these are characters who you get to hang out with long enough that you get to understand them, their environment, who they interact with, what their struggles are like, and it just locks you in tight. So like films like Tangerine and The Florida Project did this perfectly. But I also wanted to bring up how Tangerine kind of relates to Anora, because it's more of like on a technical angle, because Tangerine was all about following some street hookers. He filmed it all digitally with phones, which back in the mid 2010s was a kind of a real game changer back then. But with Anora, this film is actually shot on 35 millimeter. And it kind of has like this retro feel to it where, you know, the way that Baker depicts New York with kind of that film grain texture and the just the way that it's set up, it reminded me of films like After Hours, specifically because the film is actually kind of framed in a similar way to After Hours, basically being a more or less an adventure across the city. And the reason, and I want to stress this though, like I'm making the film sound retro. It's not. It's meant to take place in the modern day, because it involves like smartphones and all that. But you know, just the way that you look at the film, it does have that kind of like retro quality to it with how it's filmed. So the movie is about Annie, played by Mikey Madison. And she prefers to go by Annie, even though her real name is Anora, and she's a stripper at a New York club. So Annie speaks Russian, and this allows her to nab the perfect client of Ivan, played by Mark Eidenstein, who is just like, you know, a young dude who wants to party, and just, you know, the fact that, you know, the stripper can speak Russian and is coming on to him, he's loving every minute of it. So Annie's just excited that, you know, she's been able to please this client who's gonna pay off, and he does, because eventually he starts hiring her over for sex, and she finds out he's married to some, you know, his parents are very, very, very wealthy. So she thinks, okay, great, I've landed a perfect client who's going to pay me thousands upon thousands of dollars just to come over and, you know, just have sex with him. And it starts as that, you know, it turns into, you know, him inviting her over for parties, so his New Year's event party, and then eventually after that they take a trip to Vegas where they have even more fun. They have plenty of sex, they get drunk, and they start forming a bond that's strong enough where Ivan tells Annie, look, you know, I got to go back to Russia, but the only way I can stay here is if I marry an American. And so would you like to be that girl? And even though Annie is smitten enough with Ivan, she's still all about business. Everything with her is business. Like she negotiates, you know, having like a week long sex trek with him. And when marriage comes up, she says, well, you know, of course, how many carats are we talking on the ring here? Because she's all about business. And I think that's what makes Madison's performance here so damn good, is because she always feels like she's in control of any situation, even when things start going awry. And they go plenty awry in the second act, when Ivan's family is trying to come after him and force him to annul this marriage to Annie. So a few goons come over to do this. There's Toros, Garnick, and Igor, and they've all come to basically force Ivan to annul this wedding. But Ivan takes off, and Annie's left behind. And so Annie, furious that she's been abandoned by Ivan, wants to find him just as much as these Russian goons do. But that doesn't mean she's going to strike an easy alliance. And that's because, you know, Annie is so confident, and these like heated henchmen are just not. They're dopes. They get easily beaten up by her. They throw up in the car. They argue with people. They bitch about cell phones and how no one's connected anymore on social media. These guys are bad at their job. enough that Annie just kind of rolls their eyes at them or insults them all the time. And like she's willing to go along with them on this because she's been told that, hey, if you do this, we'll still give you like $10,000. You'll get something out of it, and we get something out of it. But it always feels like Ivan's family is trying to be in control of Ivan and Annie's life, and to the point where it feels like Annie's power is being taken away, even though she's still very much in control. Because later you see that, Ivan, wasn't really being there for Annie, and that, when push came to shove, he'd just go with the divorce because that's what his parents wanted. So it feels like Annie is just losing everything here. But at the same time, she really doesn't lose that sense of urgency. And I think that's best showcased with how Annie starts interacting with Igor. Because Igor he's definitely the most sympathetic henchman, because he feels a little bit sorry that he has to like restrain Annie and, place her in the car, and that he had to like gag her at one point. He's feeling bad about this and tries to make up for it. But I love the fact that Annie never compromises. Like there are so many moments in this film where you think, okay, this is kind of going to be the moment where Annie starts seeing the sweet side of Igor. They start relating to each other, and Baker just pulls that rug out immediately and says, no, Annie's in control. These guys are doofuses, and they're making her life hell. Annie's not just gonna back down on this. She's gonna spit back, and she's gonna spit acid, particularly because she uses a very, very charged slur for some of these guys, because she hates them that much, and she knows that she can bruise their egos. Like there are several scenes where it feels like Annie's going into a room. She's going to get ganged up on by all these people, and she just eviscerates all of them. Where even on like a technical and legal level, she hasn't really won, but like on a personality and ego level, she just dominates the room. In particular, I won't spoil it, but the final confrontation that she has with Ivan's family is just rich, because she knows how to. It isn't so much that she knows how to play people; it's that she knows how to attack them. So she's very much streetwise, I guess is the best way to describe it. But she is also competent enough to just like attack, like both physically and verbally, when people start stepping up to her, and it's just amazing to watch her just have that fury on the screen the entire time. So Baker's film, and I love how it just kind of builds, because like the big chase for finding Ivan across New York City, it's an adventure that takes them to shops and nightclubs and meeting all kinds of different characters. Like I said, it's very much has like that kind of after hours vibe to it. But for the first part of the film, for like roughly about the first half, Baker films that part of the film like a whirlwind romance. Like it's edited quick. Like I said, lots of drinking, sex, and partying, and just, quick shots of all the characters having fun on New Year's and at parties and in strip clubs and all that. It's very quick. It's very fast. You would almost confuse it for being for having a happy ending with how it sets up Annie and Ivan here. But then you get to that moment where Annie's restrained and she's trying to track down her man to get a divorce. It does have a tone very much, like I said, very much similar to like Tangerine, and it's got shades of After Hours in there. But you're intrigued to just see where it goes, because you never know what's going to happen next. You do know eventually, yeah, they're probably going to end up finding Ivan, but you don't expect the moments where a car might get towed, or when someone throws up in the car, or when one exchange goes awry. You're constantly invested in the film at that point. And even when they do find out, the film, I love the way the film just snowballs. How everything seems to go wrong for these henchmen trying to find Annie's man, because it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where even when they succeed, they don't really understand what they're trying to do here. Like, they don't understand annulments, despite taking it as far as they do, that they kind of have to rework everything as the film goes along. So it just keeps building up, but at the same time, it always feels like there's this constant balance of comedy and drama that is natural. That there's never a moment where like Baker's saying, okay, here's the dramatic scene where where Annie is feeling down on her luck. Here's the erotic scene where Annie and Ivan are having lots of sex, and here is the funny moment, where someone falls on their butt, or someone gets punched in the face, or someone says something very funny. All of it just has a natural flow to it, and I guess that's kind of what I expect from Baker's films. They always present characters that feel believable in the moment, to the point where you can have those moments of overlapping dialogue and where it feels like the actors are just taking hold, like this is their role now. It's not what Baker has assigned them to do. It's them at that point. But I love the way, it's always something that I love about Baker's work, and I think I love it the most here is because Baker doesn't really waste time in this film. Like, it's kind of breakneck at several points. Like, oddly enough, the chase around New York is actually a bit. I found it a little bit slower than the first half, which, like I said, just breezes by so fast and eccentric. But I love the way that that Baker just takes everything that he does best in a film and then just pumps it up. Like, he doesn't just make Annie fierce in this film. She's devouring this film whole. And I love that it doesn't just give her urgency, but it gives like a tone to this film about fighting back against like authoritarians here, that are almost established as kind of like cartoonish villains if it weren't for the fact where you realized, how much power they might actually have in reality and how likely it is that they could use it. And it's enough to make you angry, and it's perfectly personified through Annie just biting back at every chance she can. Like, there's never a moment where she kind of reveals her vulnerability. It always feels like she is fighting back, that she's on the defensive, and that she has to do it at every point. Otherwise, life is just not going to work out for her. And I feel like all of that builds up to this perfectly eerie and sad ending where you do get to see Annie at her most vulnerable, and it still manages to surprise at that moment because, again, like, it keeps pulling the rug out from under you, right down to like the final seconds where you just see the side of Annie you didn't see before, and it's gut-wrenching in that moment. Like, it punches you so hard, like out of nowhere, because you've gone throughout the film just sharing in Annie's anxiety and terror while also embracing like the absurdity and almost kind of the gallows humor of it all, that by the time you get to the end, like, it just takes a dark turn, like, and very sharply, where it feels like that's the most perfect way you could end this film, because you've had so many great moments where you're just smirking and laughing at the screen, either at Annie's biting commentary or just like the stupidity of the henchmen trying to chase after her. But yeah, it wallops you. And I guess, again, this is something that that experienced the same with the Florida Project, is that that film did take a somewhat unexpected ending that hits you really hard, and Baker does it again here. But I think, for as much as I love his other films, like, I think Anora actually might be my favorite, just because, like I said, it takes everything that Baker does best, and it dials it up to 11, and it just feels angry and fierce and alive, and it reminds you of what, great films not only feel like, but look like. Just the way that Baker shot this film, and just the retro style and texture that he gives to this film that's supposed to be modern, and it looks magnificent, and it sounds wonderful. It has fantastic performances here, particularly from Mikey Madsen, just like such an exceptional job here, that this is my favorite Sean Baker film, and definitely one of the best films of this year.